Hello and welcome back to another episode of After the Table, a TTRPG podcast. 'Tis I, your favorite rebel with a cause, sometimes, Shelly Miller. And speaking of causes and people who are awesome community organizers, we have somebody who is a great and award-winning actual play performer and producer, and recently stood up their own studio. I love hearing about people standing up their own studios in the AP space, and I love that so much. But anyways, welcome to the table, the creator of Tendervicious Studios, Hamnah. Hello, Hamnah. How's it going?
It's going well. I'm really excited to be here. Thank you for having me on.
No, thank you. Thank you for being on here. I greatly appreciate it. We've never met. I don't think we've ever been at a table together, which is kind of great. I love meeting new people, and especially in the TTRPG space. I'm like, heck yeah.
And I mean, what
Can't
better
wait.
way to get to know someone than to just like talk about, the hobby and the space and the industry together. So I think this is a very fun way to meet.
Heck yeah. So for those who are not acquainted with you, give a spiel on who you are and
All right.
what
Uh,
Tendervicious is.
Yeah, so for those of you that don't know me, my name is Hamnah. I use any and all pronouns, and I am a tabletop actual play performer and producer. I do also do some like tabletop narrative writing, kind of like on the side a little bit. But yeah, the kind of like big thing that the big project that I have been heading is I am the executive director of Tendervicious Studios, which I have been describing as a multimedia production studio. So kind of broadening out from just APs to kind of art more so in general. And the impetus for creating Tendervicious Studios was basically to be able to tell and to make art for like experimental, really intentional stories, particularly that are told by marginalized peoples of different kinds, and to be able to really spotlight the heavier stories that marginalized people might have to tell. So, really creating that sort of intentional space to one, kind of just play around and like try stuff and see what can we do with the different mediums of art that we have. What are some different ways that we can maybe push and pull with the form itself? And then the second thing is, being able to create ideally a comfortable space to be uncomfortable together and to kind of tell the stories that perhaps don't always get a space to be told in different kind of spaces, and particularly in the AP space.
Yeah, I think that's it's no shade to people, but sometimes people don't feel comfortable telling like really heavy stories in the AP space, and I'm like, no, this is the way to get it out. Some people go to therapy. I don't like talking about my feelings. Let me just act out my feelings and pretend that I am a horrible person or a hero or something like that. Because, I mean, I don't know. I'm not saying that the table should be a therapy space. No, no, that the people are not trained for that. But there is a way. I think that's the whole point of storytelling, though, is to kind of have that as a anchor to tell some of those harder stories. And I
Yeah.
think that's just art in general, is just
Yeah.
a way to, you know, kind of get thoughts, feelings, actions, whatever out on
Hmm.
whatever canvas you deem fit.
Yeah, I mean, it can be a way to like process experiences and emotions. It can be a way to commiserate together with other people who maybe have gone through similar or the same thing as you. It can be a way to just engage in catharsis or to engage in, playing in spaces of what if, like what if this, what if that. And I think that that's really valuable. And, in the AP space more broadly, I mean, generally speaking, I don't think that it's a bad thing necessarily, that people can sometimes be a little bit reticent to explore that stuff, right? I mean, there's a lot of tables where you're playing with strangers and things like that, and it's like, I would not even feel comfortable doing that personally myself, right? Like, it's not every table that I'm going to show up at and be like, I want to explore these really heavy themes. But the point of Tendervicious Studios specifically was to be able to create those kind of more higher trust tables where we have sort of infrastructure in place that helps people come together and be able to really lean into that stuff. Even if it's something that they haven't ever really explored in a different game before, or really told that story before. That's kind of the beauty of it for me, is being able to give people space to be like, do you have a story to tell, that you haven't really had a space to tell before, that maybe you've even been a little bit like afraid or like uncomfortable, in terms of like being even like saying it and like putting it out there, then come here, like come to this table and we'll give you a space to kind of do that. And it's been really beautiful to see that process kind of play out. We have a show coming up called Laurie's House, and in it, the people that have been involved in it, have all graciously, you know, told their own stories from different perspectives about various things, and I think that I have been very lucky, I think, to have gotten to be at a table like that, to be able to witness that from other people. And I feel very grateful to be able to also like share that with other people, and to be able to be like, like, here, look at the things that folks have to say. And it's a variety of kind of topics that we are kind of exploring in Laurie's house from all of the different angles of it. We have aspects of like immigration, and what does it mean to be in like an immigrant of color in a Western country? What does it mean to be in a community? We have some themes being explored about like disability and kind of like coming to terms with being disabled, and like, the unlearning like the idea that relationships are transactional in some way. We have a player who is exploring a little bit aspects of like DID, and like what does it mean to sort of like have that experience of kind of like different identities and different roles functionally that you're playing. And then my character in particular is kind of exploring a lot of suicidality and like suicidal ideation as kind of a core tenet of their narrative arc. And like, some of these topics are not things that we often see touched on in APs. And I'm really excited to be able to have like given them space to breathe and to exist.
So I've seen a lot of the I guess social media posts for Lori's house, and I love the fact that it's not just the AP, but it's a community building tool. That, I mean, there's I love the aspect of like the community center and the community building aspect of it, with you know I, I'm looking at it right now, but like potlucks and things like that. Like what spurred that?
Oh, I was generally really excited about it because, I mean, the last show that I did, Goodia, right? When I sat down with Gwen, who is the marketing strategist for that, at the time I was like, okay, I want to do marketing differently for APs. I want to make the marketing like feel the way that the show is supposed to make you feel, so that we can like hit the right audience, right? Like if you like the way the marketing campaign kind of makes you feel, you're probably like how the show kind of goes. And we found that that was a very successful way of doing marketing, and it's also really fun because it allowed like us to be more creative with it. And so we took that same philosophy into Lori's house. Gwen is still our marketing strategist, and one of our performers, and I sat down with her and I was like, okay, how do we make the marketing campaign feel the way that the show is supposed to make you feel? And Lori's house in particular is, as the title says, about Lori's house, which is a community house that is very kind of anarchist in principle, very like just created by a woman named Lori as a space for the community to kind of come in. And she has since passed at the time of the that the AP takes place, but it was taken over by her partner or her husband, Theo. And so now Theo runs Lori's house, and it's a space where people can come and stay if they need housing. It's a place where people can come and eat if they need a meal. It's a place where you can like rent out the community room to do events, and like you can just kind of hang out and come in and out, and it's like a place where the community is allowed to just be, right, and to get their needs met in different ways. And so that being the central piece of the narrative, right? It's centered around this house. My thought was, I was like, how do we make people feel like they are part of the community and they get to be part of Lori's house. Like, how do we make people feel like they can come in and out of this space and like they are a part of something? Because ultimately, that's what the show is about. Is about community. And so we kind of sat down, we had a thought, and the place that we landed was like, well, why not actually throw community events, right? Why not make that part of the promo? And so the first one we did was a community organizing meeting where I walked people through this like beautiful zine that was made by Mariam Gaba, who is a abolitionist activist in the States. And it's a zine that's basically meant to help people like figure out like, how do you want to get started into activism? What are the skills that you have? What are your interests? And like, how can we really narrow that down and make something actionable and sustainable for you as an individual? So we did it was actually really good. I was very thrilled to see so many people come, but we did that together as a stream. And then yeah, the next one that's coming up is a community potluck. So we're gonna be cooking on stream. It's gonna be a cooking stream. We're gonna talk about food, and ideally the ask is, you know, people as you watch either cook dinner or whatever meal it is at the time for yourself, or just eat. You know, if you have takeout or whatever leftovers that you've heated up, that's cool too. Like bring it and like come and have a meal with us, because food, especially right now when it's Ramadan, right? And as a Muslim myself, I'm like, you know, during this very auspicious time to kind of reflect and be with people over food is such a good way to bring community together, to bring people together, right? Like all of our religious spiritual holidays tend to like be around food, and like all of these really big events. That's one way to kind of do that. And so that's kind of the next community event. And then we have a third one that's coming up, and y'all, I guess, will hear about it first, which is we're gonna do a DJ night, or like a club night, so to speak. So we're
Nice.
gonna do like a virtual DJ, and people can just, you know, wherever you are watching, can like, you know, dance, and ideally we're like all spending time together with music, because music is another way that I think communities can really come together and like share space and be together. So that was kind of just the intent of our marketing campaign this time around, was to create spaces where people could feel like they were part of a community in some way, and in particular, you know, feel like they're a part of Lori's house in some way, so that there is that level of like, yeah, I'm a part of this, before we kind of get into the show, where we hope you will feel like you're a part of it in some way.
I love that idea because that, I mean, a lot of people just find or just look at APs as just like you are watching a play happening. But this brings more of a, hey, like these are the people behind the camera. These are the people, like this is how we're building community, not just like you watching us do stuff. It's like, hey, let's just be together, you know, have fun, learn from each other, and just get more acquainted. Especially in times like these, we need like community space where, you know, people feel the need to just like not disconnect, but like reconnect in a different way to everyday
Mm-hmm.
life.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah. And I mean, ideally, that's hopefully what these spaces are creating for people, is a space to meet other people and to reconnect, or to connect for the first time with others. I know that during the community organizing meeting, for example, like people were sharing such valuable information, and like people were telling stories about themselves and giving resources to each other. And it was just really fun, and honestly very gratifying to see, you know, people like bouncing ideas off of each other and like forming these kinds of connections and whatnot. And even if those connections don't necessarily move beyond the stream, right? Even if these aren't people that are necessarily going to talk to each other again, you know, I think that there is something very valuable in having a space where you got to do that and you got to connect with people, however transient that connection might be. And reminding yourself that, you know, community isn't always the people that you are like interacting with on a day-to-day basis. It's not always just your friends, just your family, that kind of thing, right? Your community includes your neighbors that, you know, hopefully you know, but even if you don't, right, that's part of your community. Your community includes, you know, people on the other side of town that you never see, but are still part of your city or or your town. Your community can even be in some ways like nebulous, right? Like if we talk about the queer community, that is something where we are in community. Like I, as a queer person, consider myself in community with other queer people globally. And so if somebody in another country, someone I've never met, like needs help, I consider it as part of my like community obligation of like care, and part of my praxis is, if I can help that person in some way, like I should, right? They are part of my community and I show up for them, and I hope that they would show up for me in kind of similar ways. So I like to be very intentional about my use of the word community. I don't think that every space is a community space, and I think that there is a difference between those things. And community comes with a level of like care and relational obligation that I think is very important to kind of hold as like at the forefront, and to hold very intentionally. So yeah, when I say that I'm hoping to create community spaces, I do really mean that I'm hoping to create spaces where people can feel like care for each other, and can feel that kind of like obligation seems like such a bad word, but I do mean like that obligation to each other of like, I'm here to care for you and you're here to care for me, and we are going to do that in whatever way like makes sense for us.
I guess on that, like, have you always been community focused, like wanting to organize and build in this way? Where did that come from? Like, how was it instilled in you as a child, and like through your family, or was it just something that you realized like as you were getting older, that you're like, I want to do something similar to this?
Yeah, I think that we all learn politics from birth, basically, right? From the people that are around us. And so I not in any formal way, right? Like I don't think that community organizing was something that was formally instilled in me as a kid, but I definitely like look back at the way that I was raised, and I think back about like my parents, and one thing that I do credit them for, and I'm very grateful that I had this modeled for me, was my parents are really big on mutual aid in like a very informal way. So they participate in different ways in like taking care of other people in a material way. So like, if somebody needs a place to stay, if somebody needs food, my mom is part of something that she calls like the kitty party, which is just a bunch of like Pakistani mothers like with different families who have come together and been like, okay, it's a mutual aid fund that they do for each other, basically, where they will come in and they will be like, okay, every month we're gonna put this amount of money into the pot, and every month a different person in the group gets the like total sum of money. So at the end of the year, it's or at the end of like a cycle of people, it's like a net neutral, like you got $0 and you gave $0, but in that month it's like a big deal because somebody gets like a big sum of money that they would not otherwise have had. So it's helped people pay for like those kinds of like bigger purchases that might be really difficult financially. So things like that, where it's like really like informal and just kind of like, like they're just kind of doing stuff. But seeing like those kinds of things and seeing my parents do it so like readily, and like not a lot of questions asked, not a lot of like conditions on being able to like give, I think really helped instill upon me the like value of being able to do that work. And I do want to acknowledge that like obviously that comes with a level of privilege, right? Like my family, I come from like an upper middle class family, and so like on a class level, like my family is able to do that stuff, which is why that was able to happen. And so I'm really grateful that the kind of philosophy that was instilled upon me was like, if you have it and other people need it, it is your responsibility to part with it, rather than like keep it to yourself and like other people like got to deal with it on their own kind of thing. Like thankfully that was never the way that like my family approached like that kind of community mindset. So in that way, like I've had that kind of growing up. But then in terms of more formal community organizing, I didn't actually really start doing that until about, I want to say it was like 2018, 2019, somewhere around there. Actually, it might have been earlier than that. It was shortly before I started my master's degree, which I cannot remember what year that was. But
It's grad school. It's okay.
Yeah, it was a while ago.
As a grad school dropout, I fully understand the I don't know when this
It was
happened.
like
It
7 years
happened.
ago, I think, which is I think roughly
Nebulous.
2018. But basically, what happened was that at the time I was feeling really like listless and really, um, really hopeless and defeatist. Honestly, I was sitting here and I was looking at the state of the world, in 2018, which a joke compared to when I look at it now. But in 2018, I looked at the world and I went, "Damn, this sucks. Everything sucks. Everything's bad all the time. Like." We're losing so many battles and so many like key social justice issues, and like I feel like what's the point, right? Like I was sitting here so hopeless and very like I feel like I can't do anything, and like um and then I challenged myself to be like, okay, I'm feeling like I can't do anything. Is that true? Like, is that actually true? Like, can I truly not do anything? And I was grateful to have like had some like minor experience with organizing at that point. Anyway, I in my undergrad was part of like various clubs and whatnot that were trying to do like awareness raising for different issues and stuff like that. So I had like a little bit of connection into that. And so I talked to some people in my life that had that experience, and I asked them, like, what do I do? I'm feeling like shit. Like, what do I do? And those people were able to connect me to different groups and were able to give me a lot of advice. And I, started to like follow a little bit more people in like community organizing spaces, like on the internet at the time on Twitter, and being able to like hear them talk about their work and their philosophies and their politics and things like that. And so, I immersed myself a little bit more in that side of the world and that's in those spaces, and I just kind of watched for a bit, and it really like one thing that really resonated with me in particular was Mariam Kaba's work specifically, because she's a big proponent of two things that I really like adore and that has resonated with me since then. One being this idea of like the radical imagination, this idea that in order to create a better world, you have to first be able to imagine it. That if you can't even imagine what that world looks like, how are you supposed to create it? And so, the imagination is actually a site of political struggle, and that's maybe like step one in getting people to work towards something better. And then the second thing is hope is a discipline, is what she says. She says it's not a feeling, it's not an emotion, it's a discipline. It's something you have to work at and you have to like maintain, and that it is important to do so as part of the work. And that was just such a specific, like those two things were just such specific things that I hadn't heard of before that. I'm sure lots of people have talked about it before her, but for me, I was introduced to those ideas through her, and that really stuck with me. So, I did the thing. I joined a local like labor rights movement group, and I was just volunteering at first. I was just canvassing and things like that at first, and kind of from there, the ball kind of got rolling, and I was able to clarify more of my own politics a little bit more. Realized I'm like more of an anarchist than anything else, and so kind of going from there, started to really like be like, okay, like what kinds of worlds do I want to see, and how can I work to make those real.
That's freaking amazing. Yeah, I will say this right now. Though people are like, college is turning people liberal, I'm like, no, it's actually helping them develop their brain so they can actually think for themselves. As somebody who's had to deconstruct and like deprogram themselves, because I worked for the government for 8 years, because I was in the military,
Mm.
it's one of those things like deprogramming from the military mindset, you know, trying to, become a better person, and, there's a lot of things that they instill in you, and a lot of people don't realize that, and people are like, why do veterans have such a hard time transitioning? Because we're having to deprogram a
The
lot of
propaganda
things.
is real.
The
Yeah.
propaganda is real. It's like they want you to be cookie cutter. That means you are, even as a woman, you're a misogynist. You're, you know, internalized homophobia, internalized misogyny, internalized, racism is there, and they instill it in you because that way you're a better fighting machine, you know? And I think,
Oh.
yeah, college, I will say this right now. I loved being in college. It's been a weird transition to not be in college anymore, but I think it's really, I, even if you can't afford to go to college, make sure you, like, not go to college, but get into spheres that are outside of your comfort zone, if
Well,
that
that's the
makes
thing
sense.
is, I don't even think you necessarily need like,
Yeah.
college, university, formal education to kind of get you there, right? Like I said, like for me, even a lot of my political sharpening didn't actually even happen in university. It didn't happen in classes. It didn't happen in those spaces. Really, the thing that was valuable for me for college was that it connected me to people who like were doing that, right? Like I got to
Yeah.
meet all those people that way. But really, a lot of my like learning came from outside that, right? It came from reading, articles or blog posts or like just talking to organizers and hearing them tell me about their experiences, tell me about, things like that. It's been a lot of, in recent years, it's been a lot of reading books that are written by like political thinkers or activists. Like I really do think that a lot of this education is quite accessible to the average person and, doesn't require, big financial like
Um,
commitments or like any of that. So like I
public
wouldn't do
libraries.
yeah, yeah. Like there's so many like ways to learn about all this stuff that I don't think require like going to
Yeah.
university. Obviously that's like a valuable experience in and of itself,
Yeah.
but yeah, I would say that like, I really do encourage people to think of themselves as like capable of kind of like engaging with that work, right? Engaging with that with those lines of thinking. People always think of political theory as this like scary thing, right? We read Marx and he speaks in kind of a obtuse way and it's like sure maybe from those kinds of things, but I think there's a lot of modern like books and articles and um uh like resources that have been created that kind of distill functionally the same political theories from like years and years and years ago, but into a modern context and then b in language that like actually is easy to understand. So
Yeah, once you get
uh,
past the 1950s with political theory, it's like, yes, perfect. Yes. Things I can
you know
digest in my little brain.
Yeah, like I respect Judith Butler, but reading Gender Trouble took me so long because
Oh,
the writing
yeah.
was a lot. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. 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 Oh, goodness.
yeah,
There's a lot of gender theory that I was just like, I'm going to get through this. I just need to take it word by word.
yeah. But I mean, thankfully, again, like a lot of modern resources that don't do that, and then that are written a lot more clearly. So, it's a world out there. I encourage
Yeah.
people to engage with it, like in whatever way is best for you.
If you're in the United States, get a freaking library card. They're free. Public libraries are free.
Yeah, yeah.
They have resources. Use them
Actually, have
before
like
we lose them.
movies and stuff too. Like you can do a
Yeah.
lot at libraries, actually.
Depending on like your local library, I mean, your local library might have like a 3D modeler there or like a
Yeah,
printing
yeah.
and scanning services, and like a lot of them have, if you're wanting to do like family research, a lot of them have like genealogy departments and everything like that. It just,
Great resources.
yes. Yeah, unfortunately the libraries, like university libraries, you have to be a student to get into, or a faculty member, unfortunately, but your local library, your public library, use them. So, I guess the other question is, how did you get into TTRPGs? Now that
Yeah.
we've gone from like your
Going on so
actual,
many tangents.
yeah, so many
What
tangents.
is, what's the tabletop reason that we're here? Yeah.
Yeah.
Funnily enough, my first time playing a tabletop game was an undergrad. It was like third year or something. And it was it was a one shot of Everyone is John. That somebody ran for us like in the like in the common room or whatever in the space that we would hang out. And I saw or I heard one of my friends talking about like a previous game of Everyone is John that they had played, and I was like, that sounds like fun. Like I would love to do that and try that. And so we got a little group together and we played Everyone is John. And I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a lot of fun. And then from there, I got into, funnily enough, at the time D&D 4e, even though 5e had already come out, but for whatever reason we were playing 4e. And so we did like a long campaign of D&D 4e, and then it was just kind of like rolling from there, how I got into it. But I always think it's kind of funny to say because I'm like, yeah, my first game was Everyone is John. I don't, yeah.
That's an odd. I've never heard of that game, and I'm very interested because I'm like, is everybody the same person?
Yeah, so you play as like facets of like you play like with the same character. You play John, and
like
it's
like John Malkovich type of situation.
just a guy. You play just a guy. Like a guy named John, and he has narcolepsy is like the canon thing. And the thing is that you are all like different parts of his brain who want him to do different things. So you have like a goal basically that you're trying to achieve, and you're fighting for control over John. So only one player can actually control him at a time, and it's basically like you and the GM, like whoever's in charge, will like do like a scene or whatever, and then through certain triggers, the control of John can like pass between players and things like that. You like bid points to get control of him, and it's a competitive game. There's like a point system, and whoever wins the most points by the end of the game like wins. It's very fun in my opinion. It gets really silly because you don't know what each other's goals are. So like it could be as simple as like, I want to buy a chocolate bar from the candy store, to like one of my friends had that they needed to specifically set trash cans on fire. That was their goal. Yeah, so it's like a whole thing, and the game is purposefully silly. So like doing anything is considered difficult, and you have to like roll for it, and it's like
of course
a whole thing. Yeah.
I love that. I kind of want to play that now. That sounds like a silly fun time.
It's very silly.
So how did you get into the AP part? Were you introduced like through watching it, or did you just like hop in?
I was during the pandemic introduced to Critical Role, which yes, I know a lot of people got into APs during the pandemic.
I understand. That was me. I was just like,
but well, I should clarify, during the start of the pandemic, because the pandemic is ongoing, but during the start of the pandemic, I was introduced to Critical Role, and they do great work, but it wasn't really quite for me. But the thing that was really like hit me was I was like, oh, wait a minute, you can play these games, but like as a show, like you can do that. I didn't know that APs were a thing until Critical Role, and I was like, oh, that's really cool. And then I started looking for like other shows that I was like, there's got to be one that like hits for me, right? Because CR didn't quite hit for me. And I found actually they're a studio that no longer exists, but I found through Off the Table, in combination with Salty Sweet Games, they did a podcast called Missing Annie Lee, and it was a AP of Fear Itself. And so it's a horror podcast, and they did this really cool thing where they would release episodes in 2 different timelines. So there was like a present timeline and then a past timeline, and the players were playing the same characters but like in different timelines. And also the 2 timelines were GM'd by 2 different people. And so they would like, it was really fun, and I really enjoyed listening to that. And I was like, oh man, like this is really cool, and I want to like do that if I can. And so I was like following some like indie tabletop performers and stuff on Twitter, and I saw a casting call from Off the Table actually, for a Slayers mini series that they were doing. And I was like, oh, that's cool. I'm going to just apply. Why not? I've never done anything like this. I'm not a theater kid. I like don't really have performing experience or anything. But I'm going to try anyway and see what happens. And I'm very grateful that Angela, who was the GM of that show, she took a chance on me, even though, I was not like a Twitter personality. I didn't have anything really. The most that I had was that I like on and off like streamed video games on Twitch at the time. Um, very small channel, like not big following or anything. But Angela took a shot with me, and I got to be a part of like I got very lucky. It was like all POC table, all queer, like all trans. Like it was like a beautiful, like wonderful table. I'm very grateful that that was how I like got my introduction to APs, because I had a blast doing it. And from there I just like, met more people in the space and just kind of like went from there. And I still look back very fondly at that show, because it was very fun. Although if you go back and look, I look very different now than I did then. So like I look like a child, and also like I have like really long hair. It's like a whole thing. I look very different. So.
It's also been 5 years.
Yeah.
You have to think of it that way. It's also been 5 years.
I just look back and I'm like, damn, I looked like that, huh?
I look at pictures from 5 years ago, and I'm like, damn, okay.
Right? Yeah. It's like a lot can happen in 5 years.
A lot can happen. So what kind of stories do you like to tell, either as a player or as like whenever you do production for an AP?
Mm-hmm.
Or GM? Do you GM occasionally, or?
So I don't love GMing, is the thing. I've like GM'd some home games, and that's been like fun, but I find that GMing is it's a different skill set than playing is, or like even producing a show is, and I am not that brave. I salute all of the GMs out there. Y'all are braver than me. So I don't GM, but the stories that I like to tell tend to be, surprise, surprise, like I like to call them Tendervicious, which is a term that I learned actually from C. Thomas of Transplanar RPG, who introduced me to that term, and I was like, that's perfect. Because I really like to tell stories that are in that place of like intimacy and like stories about relationships and about the bonds between people. So that kind of like sort of tender aspect of it, but in a vicious way as well, where like I like to explore what happens when we exist in the moral grays. How do we navigate that as people? How do we navigate that in relationships? Is that something that we can come back from? Is it not? Where are the limits on that? And so I really love to play like messy like stories where we explore like those kinds of themes, where the people are really the heart of the story. I think it's wonderful to have like big worlds and like a lot of lore and like things like that, but I think for me, when I'm making stories, I really prefer to like microscopic, like hone in on like the characters specifically, and the broader world to me feels or like a broader like narrative to me feels like it should be, in my preference anyway, like in service of the character story. So really like character driven stories, to its true definition, are the kinds of things I like doing like character studies through APs. I really love that. I like to get to see like the internal emotional worlds of the different characters and making those the focus of the narrative and the narrative arcs. Yeah, like I just love to see and tell stories about like what does it mean to be a person? What does it mean to love? What does it mean to exist in relation to each other? And how can we do that in a way that feels good for everyone? And what do we do when it doesn't feel good, right? So that's kind of where I shine, I think.
I guess that comes back to the studio itself, Tendervicious, and telling those kinds of stories. So you already told us a little bit of like what Lori's House is about. We as the public, we as the consumer of the stories, what can we expect like after Lori's House? Have you planned that far? What is production? What is the ramp up in production look like?
I am big on taking your time to do stuff and not burning yourself out. Especially, I feel like, with creators, just
I'm just gonna go out real quick. Sorry.
I mean, I'm sure you can relate, right? Like with creators of all types, right? Whether you're in APs or not, there is this expectation of like churning out content, right? Content after content after content. And like it needs to be this constant flow or you will become irrelevant and people will forget you and you're gonna not be successful and whatever, right? I'm trying really hard with Tendervicious Studios to ideally, and I hope, create an example of a model of creation of art making that is the antithesis of that. So I'm really prioritizing taking our time and being really intentional with the things that we make, not just for the sake of like making something, but because it's a story we really want to tell, and we've taken the time to tell it in the best way that the story needs, but also in a way that takes care of us as the creators behind it. That's a very long way of saying I don't have plans for After Laurie's House just yet. Mostly because the plans for Laurie's House are quite extensive, actually, and they go for at least another year or two, if not longer. Not the show itself, but like kind of the everything around the show and how we plan on kind of working with it. One thing, for example, is that for Laurie's House, we actually designed our own tabletop system to play the game because we wanted to tell a very particular story about memory and identity. And we looked around and we couldn't quite find a system that allowed us to do the thing we wanted to do. So, what do you do when that happens? I guess you make your own game. So
Yeah.
we did. So we designed our own game, and the ash can for that will be releasing soon, so people can get a chance to see that. But we will be releasing like the full game sometime soon after that. Sometime after the show is over, we have plans to release the full game, and we have some kind of other moving parts that are going to go with that. So we are hoping that we can kind of sit with this story for quite some time before moving on to something else. And in the meantime, if people are really interested in kind of seeing like what other stories have been told in this same vein, I really encourage people to go watch Goodia. It is a Bluebeard's Bride one shot that I produced before Tendervicious Studios was made, but now I have kind of subsumed under the TVS label. And yeah, it's a very beautiful story told by a all of the players are Daisy of some kind, and then we have the lovely Josephine Kim as our GM, and it is a story that explores the intergenerational trauma of like colonization and racialized misogyny. It is in my opinion, and I'm biased, of course, but in my opinion, it is a really, really resonant and a beautiful and a painful way kind of show. So yeah, if you're like, I can't wait for other stuff other than Laurie's House, go watch Goodia. It's really good.
Heck yeah. And I guess, yeah, where can people plug your shit? Where can people find you? Where can people find Tendervicious?
Yeah, so like I mentioned, my name is Hamnah. I am all over the social medias at Lilith TTRPG. I mostly exist on Blue Sky, though, in terms of being active. I find social media very difficult. So I do have accounts everywhere, but like, if you want to see me actually say stuff, Blue Sky is the place to be. As for Tendervicious Studios, we also have accounts everywhere. We are tendervicious.com on Blue Sky, as well as our website, and we are Tendervicious Studios everywhere else. I am actually posting on all the social medias for that one, though, so you can follow us anywhere, and I promise there's stuff to see. And I will point out, for those of us that like clues and mysteries and putting stuff together, you should probably pay a little bit of attention to our promotional campaign for Laurie's House. There's a hint, a secret hidden in there that nobody's noticed yet, that will tell you a little bit more about the show. And that's all I will say about that, because I don't want to give too much away.
Look! I'm gonna be nosy, and I want to know all the clues! That is amazing. Like they said, you can find them everywhere, and all the links will be down below, so you should go check those out. Speaking about links down below, you find all my links down below, and you can find me everywhere on the internet at Shelly Von Miller, to include Fourth Wall memberships and Patreon, where you can support this show and get early access to it, as well as other content like me getting ready to get into drag, to do all sorts of things. Yeah, I'm here. I'm just here. With that being said, I love you guys very much, and I will see you on the internet. Goodbye!